and Minister of Defense Ezer Weizman. They discussed a number of joint Israeli-Iranian military projects, among them Project Flower.
So we just know about one of these projects.
Yes. This project focused on the development of a longer-range Gabriel anti-ship missile and a future submarine-launched variant. Iranian concerns over missile and nuclear developments in India and Pakistan were also discussed. The following year, Iran supplied Israel with $280 million worth of oil as a down payment.
A down payment. That was just this first part of it.
Yes. A team of Iranian experts began construction of a missile assembly plant in south-central Iran. And then in February 1979, the Shah of Iran was overthrown in the Iranian revolution, and we're told by Wikipedia that Project Flower ended. But I don't believe that. It says the Israeli engineers and defense officials returned to Israel, and all the blueprints and diagrams of the weapon systems were sent back via diplomatic courier.
Bless my pea picking heart. It all went back.
They all got it back.
Wow.
No, they didn't get them back until Mossad went to Iran last year and raided that old warehouse because somebody remembered, oh my, all those memos and cables and documents are in a warehouse.
Pick those up in case it was getting the wrong hands.
All right. So it's a huge story, but there's also a connection to Iran-Contra. This is all tied in together at that time. Israel was laundering, the money was, Ali North was laundering money, all right, through Israel and Iran to get weapons to Nicaragua.
Yes, the Contras, the anti-Sandistas in Nicaragua. And part of this, Rick, is actually the Hawk missile. One of the connections we found actually between Project Flower and the Iran-Contra affair is that in 1985, actually, the National Security Council diverted proceeds to fund the Contras, but actually this was money that was made from the sale of Hawk missiles to Israel, which were then part of the reverse engineering process for the Project Flower missiles. So the inspiration behind the Project Flower ballistic missiles, in part, comes from the U.S.-made Hawk missiles involved in the Iran-Contra affair.
The Iranian secret police, I don't know what they're called now, but back then in the Shah days was called Savak.
Yes.
It was the Israeli Mossad and the American CIA
trained Savak
that set them up and trained them.
Yes.
So the Israeli Mossad trained Iranian secret police and intelligence agents.
And they didn't disappear when the revolution happened. They just changed the masks that they wore. They continued after the revolution.
You know, something specifically they did, they actually supported the Kurds in Iraq. So you think, for example, why Turkey always has a very suspicious eye toward Israel is that there long has been reported connections between Israel and other Gulf states in manipulating or funding the Kurds, the PKK, for example, in Turkey. In this case, the Savak, in coordination with Mossad, was actually helping to start a revolution in Iraq against Saddam Hussein.
Israel's handler during all this arms dealing back in the 70s was Yaakov Nimrodi.
Jacob Nimrod.
That's an interesting.
That's really what his name was, Jacob Nimrod, Yaakov Nimrodi, Israel's military attaché. And one of the things that they were doing then was arming the Kurds.
Right, like Edward was saying.
So this is the very group the U.S. has decided to partner with both in Syria and Iraq. And even as recently, the Mossad has brought actually Kurdish leaders in to train them. This was something we reported on True News about a week ago.
Listen to this quote from May 1982, Washington Post. Israeli Defense Minister Ariel Sharon, who later became prime minister, who was just an old Zionist terrorist in the 1940s.
With Ergun.
Yes. He said, quote, this is to the Washington Post, Iraq is Israel's enemy, and we hope that diplomatic relations between us and Iran will be renewed as in the past. Then 4 months later, speaking in Paris, Ariel Sharon said, now, there was a war going on between Iran and Iraq.
Yes.
Ariel Sharon said in 1982, Israel has a vital interest in the continuing of the war in the Persian Gulf in Iran's victory.
They were rooting for Iran.
The Israeli defense minister, later prime minister, said, look, we've got a stake in this war between Israel and Iraq, and we want this war to continue, and we want Iran to come out on top.
And he wasn't alone in that. Itzhak Shamir held to that. Shimon Peres held to that. I mean, that continued through various administrations. They were rooting for Iran back then.
And essentially, the U.S. was backing Iraq. So the U.S. officially was backing Iraq. Israel, using our weapons, laundered weapons basically to Iran to help them fight the U.S. ally.
And after the revolution in '79, when the Americans were held hostage under Jimmy Carter, Israel was selling weapons to the new Iranian government that was holding Americans hostages.
Yes.
That's incredible, because you think this is the regime that Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, is always fear-mongering us for, right? That Iran has been a chaotic state since the revolution.
Listen to this. Israel lost no time supplying the new Khomeini regime with small quantities of arms, even after the seizure of the U.S. Embassy. The first sales included spare parts for U.S.-made F-4 Phantom jets. A deal that they made in October 1980 included parts for U.S.-made tanks. Israel informed Washington only after the fact, when they were far down the line and right into the middle of the thing. Then they told the U.S. what they were doing, and then the U.S., threw a fit about it, but they did nothing to stop Israel from continuing to do it.
And Jimmy Carter's national security advisor, Brzezinski, said the Israelis had been secretly supplying American parts to the Iranians without concern for the negative impact it was having on our leverage with the Iranians on the hostage issue. So Jimmy Carter was trying to get the American hostages set free.
Free Americans.
Yes, Americans. And Israel, our ally, was selling American-built military weapons and parts to the Iranians who were holding our citizens hostage. That's our wonderful ally, Israel. And it says, Secretary of State Edmund Muskie demanded that Israel cease its shipments. Prime Minister Begin promised to comply, but the supply line remained open without Washington's approval, carrying tanks and ammunition to Iran.
And why didn't the administration crack down? One reason is simply that no president since Eisenhower has really punished Israel for acting against U.S. interests. Prime Minister Begin bombed the Iraqi nuclear reactor, invaded Lebanon, and annexed the Golan Heights, the Stolen Heights now, and sped up the settlement of the occupied West Bank, much to the Reagan administration's embarrassment. But considerations of military strategy and Israel's political clout in Congress.
Yes, that was laid out by Iran Gate, the Israel connection.
Always gave the client state the upper hand.
The Zionists, the worldwide Zionist movement controls America, absolutely controls it. Nobody speaks against it.
That's consumed us.
They've taken over the country. Here, I want you to hear one more quote. This is from Haaretz reporter Yoav Carney. He said, "The cloak of secrecy that surrounds Israeli arms exports is so tight that one can compare it to the technique for smuggling hard drugs."
They just compared them to a drug cartel. That's what the
I think it's one and the same.
Yes.
And they would use international methods in order to make these shipments happen. There's one story that talks about how they would ship some of these components all the way to the Philippines, get it repackaged, and then ship it to Iran from there.
And they used Argentina, too, specifically for TNT. About 500 million kroner of TNT was moved in this fashion.
This article goes into great detail about how many times, this is in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, that the Israeli government lied to American presidents, American secretaries of state, outright lied, deceived. And they're still doing it. If they did it for decades in the past, don't you believe Israel is still lying to American presidents and secretaries of state?
Absolutely. They've been rewarded every time. They lied in order to get their nuclear weapons program off the ground and into full production. They lied during this version of the Iran-Contra affair. They have likely lied now in the development of their superpower weapons for the cyber war coming in the near future.
I don't know if you may have just read this when I was said it, and I was reading something. A Milan, Italy, weekly magazine, Panorama, this is back in the 80s, reported that Israel had sold the Iranian government, the current one, post-revolution,
Right.
sold them 45,000 Uzi machine guns, anti-tank missile launchers, missiles, howitzers, and aircraft replacement parts.
I don't know if you remember that the Iranian pilot that defected to Saudi Arabia. I remember this was a big story of 84, 85. So he flew his F-4 Phantom jet from Iran, landed in Saudi Arabia. But the Newsweek reported that when they did an analysis of the jet and started looking at the jet, that most of the replacement parts had been re-exported to Tehran that had originally started in Israel. Somehow those parts on that Phantom jet that landed in Saudi Arabia from Iran originally started in Israel. Somehow those parts started in Israel and ended up in Tehran.
Well, this one's really important because President Johnson was actually the first U.S. president to authorize any offensive weaponry be sold to Israel, specifically in the argument that they needed to be defended. Israel needed the F-4 Phantom, for example, in order to defend itself from its Arab neighbors. What this clearly shows is Israel took that trust, that generosity of the United States, and they have laundered it into the very people they are now telling us are trying to kill them.
You know where this is going? At some point, we are going to be told that it was Iran that brought down the World Trade Center towers and attacked the Pentagon. I really believe this is coming.
I think you're right, Rick.
And I don't know who President Trump was referring to last week when he said, hey, it wasn't the Iraqis that attacked us. I know who did it. But he didn't tell us who. But I have a feeling that he's being primed. He's being prepared. You know, they're giving him top secret information. Mr. President, we're going to have to show you something here, that this has been kept secret. And, you know, it was really Iran that attacked us on 9/11. And here's the evidence. We just got this in from
hot off the press, sir.
From Israel. It just came in. The Mossad found these documents, all right? It was Iran that attacked you. And I really think this is where we're going.
And they've already laid the groundwork for this by comparing the IRGC to al-Qaeda. The LA Times, for example, reported extensively about the connections in civil cases to hold Iran responsible by giving intelligence assets, for example, before the attacks. And now also they have to pay, the Iranian government has to pay reparations, you know, kind of damages to victims of 9/11. The groundwork is already there to make the jump.
Well, back in, I think it was 2010, there was a documentary film made that Newsmax reported this, and Ken Timmerman, who was the neocon,
right?
He was big on this, that the documentary filmmakers said that they met Osama bin Laden 4 or 5 times in Iran.
Right.
That Iran was hiding Osama bin Laden.
Iran?
Yes.
Yes, not Iraq.
Not Pakistan.
No. That he was the whole time that, all right, that he was hiding in Iran, and
no wonder we couldn't find him.
Yeah, they were looking in the wrong places.
Yeah, we were looking at Afghanistan, bombing it, Iraq, bombing it, but it turns out he was in Iran all along.
But get ready, that's going to be the ace card that they pull out.
It grieves me because you know the American public will buy it.
So what do? You bring out this evidence, fake evidence, and then you have a new 9/11.
carried out by the IRGC, which we're calling, we designated a terrorist organization.
So they're gonna tell the American people, here's the truth about 9/11, and then shortly after that, there'll be another 9/11. And you'll have a double whammy. And what do you got left to do? Attack Iran.
You got to defend freedom.
So all we can do, folks, is try our very best to head off at the pass the liars and deceivers, the propagandists. Never forget, Benjamin Netanyahu, his skill is a propagandist. He was a propaganda minister in the Israeli government before he ever became a politician.
Master manipulator.
Yes, that is his job. He's excellent at it, and we cannot allow him to to continue lying and deceiving the American people into supporting a war that he wants. He needs to come clean about his country supplying missiles to Iran that could carry nuclear warheads. He wouldn't come on this program and do an interview, would he?
Who knows?
Well, he knows what I'm going to ask him. But you know what they'd say? It was all fake. Rick, all those stories were fake. We planted those stories out there to make. They would just blow away.
We sold them defective equipment.
Yes.
Those missiles didn't work, Rick.
They've already made that argument.
Yes.
They were selling low-grade equipment, but we made money on it. In fact, that one article that we were quoting said exactly that,
Yes.
that they used that in order to finance their current defense posture.
Yes. They said it was all a scam. The official Israeli position on all the stuff that we just told you, the official Israeli position is, yes, but it was all scam. We scammed the Iranians, we sold them defective missiles, and we took their money. Aren't we good guys? That's their official position. So I guess the Uzi submachine guns,
I guess they don't work.
I guess they were everything that they sold.
The F-4s don't fly, the
Right.
tanks don't fire. Okay.